and pray, please God make her go to sleep. Please God make her go to sleep. Please God make her go to sleep. Because I knew when she fell on the bed in a drunken stupor, we'd all get a bit of peace.
You see, why women are going to the pub these days is for skittles and darts. So women have took up quite a lot. And therefore that brings them to the pub for to play it.
But pints were only tuppence halfpenny, you know, pint of beer. And if there's a few of you together, 5 pints for a bob. You won a halfpenny for buying 5. Imagine that. You could get drunk on a shilling.
Drink was a thing that men dreamed of. When we get out, we'll have a good old drink. When we go so-and-so, we'll have a nice drink. We'll have a party after the war and we'll have all the drink we want. Things like that. That was their dreams.
And he said to me, Mary, how do you know what to say? So I said, well, Mr. King, I've done everything the readers have done. I've had a failed marriage. I've had to fight, literally fight for a tuppenny loaf of bread. And I've been hungry, and I've been disappointed. And I can sit down and put myself in the reader's place. He referred to me as the Daily Mirror sob sister, in brackets, the best in the business. My mother was Jekyll and Hyde. She was an absolute charmer when she was sober, but a terror when she'd been to the pub. So I went in fear of my mother. At mealtime she kept a cane on the table, and the cane was always behind the kitchen door. And the worst thing was if I'd done something she thought was wrong, really wrong, she'd send me upstairs and say, I'll come and see you later. And she'd keep me waiting for an hour to come up with the cane. I didn't really like my mother at all.
Before I was a year old, my mother thought she would have a pub. If anybody started getting funny, which they did, she would just lift the let, what they called the let, that was part of the counter, and just go through and get hold of them, out. And nobody ever turned on my mother. They were great big fellas, and nobody ever turned on her that I can ever remember. She ruled her pub. She was the boss. So now you know where I get it from.
In those early days, in my childhood, church was as natural as sleeping in your own bed. I was early persuaded that the nature of the good life was abstention from such evils as alcohol and betting, and early on dancing. But I seem to remember that we were able to get in under the category of dancing some of the folk dances, and which were in the Sunday school and we enjoyed them, though we were not permitted, I think, to tango.
If we got them in when they got paid on the Friday, they would stay there until they spent up, and then the poor wives didn't get any money. Some of the wives used to come round and stand at the bar door and wait, try and catch their men for a couple of shillings to go on the market to buy something for the kids. It was really hard times. You could open all day. It was to your discretion if you opened all day. But you did, because if you didn't, you were losing money. They were going somewhere else. They couldn't get in your pub, they would go in our pub. See? So my mother used to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning when they were building the pier. And they would all call for a pint on their way to work.
In the street where I lived, which was a poor street, it was accepted that your dad came home on a Saturday night from the pub at midnight, and he blacked your mother's eye, and then he fell into bed. But not your mother. Mother was sacred. Mothers were looked up to. And I would be going to church on Sunday morning and meet my pals, and they'd say, "Oh, your mum wasn't half drunk last night." And I can't tell you the shame. It really was quite dreadful.
It was taboo for a woman to go in a pub. It was a terrible thing.
I had no doubts at all that it was a wicked thing, was alcohol. It was part of the presentation of the Methodist and the nonconformist tradition of those days, that alcohol was regarded as the prime personal evil. Now, the Band of Hope was a sort of secondary Sunday school. It met on Monday evenings in our church. My father was the superintendent of it, or the one who took charge of it. And we were entertained week after week with lantern slides and magic lanterns with the concept of alcohol's the devil in solution.
He was brought up very strictly. My father was. And he never drank. He bought this magic lantern and started showing these pictures, which in those days, pictures was something marvellous to kids. It became the Band of Hope. And that's how that started.
I see no reason why I shouldn't confess that I was particularly fond of a young lady at the time. We used to sit in the back row. We enjoyed the lantern slide, but we were rather concerned that the lights shouldn't go on too suddenly.
I used to say in my 4-year-old voice, "A drunkard stood in his cheerless home, in deep distress he seemed, for poverty and want had come where hope and joy once been. Ah me," he said, with tearful voice, and gazed on those children above. "No food for these my children dear, no bread for her I love." At his humble cry he turned around and said, "I am a drunkard, not a man." And the kids used to clap, and I thought it was wonderful, being clapped at 4-year-old. And then we used to have postman's knock, little games, and Mother used to make little buns, and Father used to make ginger beer, and we had a little interval. They all had a glass of ginger beer and a bun. And then we used to come out and sing the closing hymn, "My drink is water bright from the crystal sea."
And if you got the officers off the boats, they stuck with you in your pub. And of course there was another 7 pubs alongside down that area. You used to just wait of them coming off the ships, which pub are they going to choose. We used to encourage them lots of ways. My mother used to make sandwiches, and then on the counter there was pipes, free pipes, clay pipes. You got one of those free if you're a smoker. And she had a, what do you call them, an urn on the counter with a bit of gas jet under it, and she would make bovril. There were no oxo in those days; it was all bovril. And they would come in off shift, 12-hour shifts, of course, 6 days a week. And they would have a cup of bovril before they had a pint. But some of them could take their pints forevermore.
Well, there's any son, no, I reckon. He's a jolly good fellow. I was a lad then, 9-year-old. I used to have a little iron cart, go from our place to Yovo, bring back 30 boxes of fish, come back down Barbara's pub about 9 o'clock at night, and that's when I had my first half pint of beer. That was, ale was 3p a pint, and beer was 2p a pint. And in those days, my father could down there with a shilling. He could have his 3 pints of cider, take down a bottle of parsnip wine and help with the cider, ounce of tobacco, a box of matches, and a halfpenny change. But those days is gone now.
Right along the foot of the counter was about a 6-inch trough full of sawdust, and that was where the men had to spit. Why men spitted in those days, I don't know. But wherever they were, they used to spit. And there were spittoons, those round iron things, here, there, and everywhere, for men to spit in, filled with sawdust. And that was awful. You had to empty that out, and then black lead, with brushes and black lead, and polish them up. My mother's awful particular about them. But that trough along the edge of the bar, oh, that was terrible. Oh, I can see it now. But that, a pint, that's what it was. Horrible things they used to do, But it was just ignorance, wasn't it? I mean, they wouldn't do that today.
We were working out here at the Manor Farm. There were 13 of us used to do piecework. And the Women's Institute used to have their day off. Right, mother's gone to born. I used to get on my push bike, go from here to Compton, be a 5-quart jar, bring it back full of cider. And we sit up in the field where we're supposed to be working, hoeing, and we'd have a week like that straight off, not hit a stroke. Only take your foot up there and eat your foot and drink the cider. And that happened for years, that did, till the Women's Institute stopped going on these outings. Yeah. That was the good old days.
There was fights. They would go outside to fight. They wouldn't wreck your bar. I never remember them wrecking the bar. But I remember as a child out playing, and the first one and then another coming. Oh, come on, let's go on the shore. There's going to be a fight. A couple of fellas would walk down to the shore and fight, and then walk back and have a drink together.
It's such a long time ago, I'm sure that I can say this now. My father had his own problems. His own father had to be extracted from the pub quite often on Saturday night, and I can remember them knocking on our door and asking my father to go and do the extraction.
My mother would scream and shout at my dad, and she was a convent schoolgirl. She'd been at a convent boarding school till she was 17. Where she got the language from, I'll never know. But she would just call him dreadful names. And then all the china that was on the sideboard or on the kitchen table would be hurled. And this would go on, and I used to stand in the corner and pray, please God make her go to sleep. Please God make her go to sleep. Please God make her go to sleep. Because I knew when she fell on the bed in a drunken stupor, we'd all get a bit of peace.
I've been walking through the churchyard, down to the pub, for the last 70 years. There's a lot of Gillums down there. My grandfather's there, grandmother's there, father, mother, sister, 2 sisters. And the other sister, Ashes, is there. And my youngest sister died at 7-year-old. And she was as quick as a bee. And she had congestion of the lung. She died in agonies. I never wish to see another child in the body die like that. No. It was hard to bear. Yes.
There was nothing, you see, in those days to what you have now. We had no telephones, we had no wirelesses well, of course, you know, there was no televisions, but there was nothing else to do. Men would play toss penny. They would go in a group and toss a penny, and if it went in this ring that they'd marked, well, they won. I mean, simple little games like that, and throwing a ball into a pint pot edged against the wall, tipped up a little bit, and if you could throw this little ball in, marbles.
52, 54, 48. Every Saturday night, if you won down the pub at 6:30, you couldn't get a game. Yeah. Because there was voted 8 waiting to play. First come, first serve. And then you had to wait till they played the game right through, and savers that out to take on the winners. The loser that finished.
6. I can't believe it was that far up. That's what it was.
It was rings, darts. Yeah, rings used to be a hell of a game. You had a board with hooks on it, and then you had rubber rings, and you used to fling them up, try to pitch on the hooks. But you don't see none of that today.
We didn't depend on pressing a knob and listening to a famous singer. We provided our own entertainment.
You don't get the songs in the pub like you 2 years ago. Landlords won't let you do it. No.
My sister had a splendid singing voice, really, as a child, as a girl. My brother played the fiddle, played the violin, I played the piano, and we provided concerts when we invited people to come to see us. And we thoroughly enjoyed them.
Of course, it set off quite happily. There would be great songs where you were stamping your feet and you clapping your hands, and then suddenly, when it got near to closing time, they would get maudling, and it was all these songs that made you cry. Don't go down the mine, Daddy, and why can't the little blind boy, why can't I see like you, Daddy, and there's no one like Mother to me. And then there was the end one, was the 6 feet of earth make you all of one size. And there would be tears dripping in the pints. And I would be vamping away on the piano. I couldn't play the tunes, but I just used to vamp and make a noise. It satisfied them. And that they're supposed to go home feeling great, having a good night out. Drunk last night, we were drunk the night before. We're gonna get drunk tonight if we never get drunk anymore. The more I drink, the better it is for me. But I belong to a pissed family. We were pissed last night, we were pissed the night before. We're gonna get pissed tonight if we never get pissed anymore. The more I'm pissed, the better it is for me.
but I belong to a fishing family.
It was a great culture shock to me, being brought up in the enclosed atmosphere, suddenly to be exposed to a world of which I knew practically nothing. And I suppose I sailed into the Old Kent Road, sort of assuming that they would fall down in acclamation of my presence. They didn't. It did me good, but I didn't like it at the time. I found I didn't know much about them. And I found that I knew even less about the environment in which they lived. I'd never seen a slum. And I went across, and there was this fellow standing with a razor in his hand, two children cowering in the corners of the room, and his wife bleeding to death. I found that shocking, and I wonder how many of my sermons really came within 1,000 miles of that.
Then let me say quite clearly that anybody who, in my judgment, for personal gain promotes the interests of tobacco is morally culpable. I believe that you can come to the Sermon on the Mount without being taught, and you can respond to what it says.
There were many other effects of drink, making them tolerate a situation in which they should have been revolutionaries. That is to say, politically, they were too lazy, and they'd prefer the pub and its ease to the platform and its program.
They never had nowhere else to go. There was no club rooms, no hall, village hall, nothing of that in those days. So if they wanted enjoyment, they had to go to the pub.
The escape from the Old Kent Road, temporary escape, was in liquor, over and over and over again. People put up with it because they could get not roaring drunk, but sufficiently inebriated to slip over into another world, at least for a little while.
I think my mother did it for the same reason. Drink brings forgetfulness. For an hour, 2 hours, you're on a high, you're in a different world. Everything looks rosy. You forget your aches and pains. And then, of course, it's a drug. It's an addictive drug.
In the winter, we used to get a rum ration. In the summer, we got lime juice. Those 2 tablespoons in the winter, when you were frozen, probably wet through up to here in water or mud, and you'd wake somebody up and say to your ration, wake up, well, it was life-saving, I think. We looked forward to the rum because it ironed out some of your worries and whatnot, just temporarily, because we didn't have enough to make us really intoxicated. It just made you a wee bit elevated, We all thought that we were only on the earth for a short time, in the infantry anyway. And that was one way of spending our time and forgetting it a bit, no matter about the discomforts or anything.
Of all the boyfriends I had, and I had many, because they came and went and never came back, not one ever said a word to me about. I think they wanted to forget. All they wanted to do was go to a show and go dancing.
When the roll is called up yonder, 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 I'll be there. That was it, yes. And we used to sing When the Beer is on the Table to that one. When the beer is on the table, when the beer is on the table, when the beer is on the table, when the beer is on the table. And there was one fellow with a badly wounded leg, a couple of beds from me, and every morning he had to have packing packed into the bone, and I remember the sister used to pull the packing out and smell it to see if it was putrefying, and he used to yell. Well, they gave him a drink. What it was, I don't know, but I think it was champagne. But it wasn't enough to deaden him, because he used to yell like anything, poor blighter. Well, when we were halfway along the communicating trench, I thought, I'll have a drop of that water now, and I took a huge swig, and it was rum, pure rum. Nearly choked me, of course. Somebody, I don't know who it was, that put it in their water bottle. Anyway, I carried on, and liking it, I suppose, and feeling okay, I had another swig. I flopped into a shelter. I went to sleep. And I remember one of the chaps waking me up. I should wake up if I were you, Corp. I was shelling. And I said to him, what's the time? He said, time? This is Tuesday or something. What do you mean? He said, you've been there 24 hours. Just then our young lieutenant came along. He said, hello, Corporal. Oh, you're in the land of living again. What happened? I told him. You idiot, he said. Do you know, you could have been shot at dawn. I could have been. In the trenches, drunk. I could have been shot at dawn.
We are fighting Germany, Austria, and drink. And the greatest of these deadly foes is drink.
If you ask me what were the reasons for the application in 1914 and 15 of licensing laws, it was the recognition on the part of a number of people who would never have called themselves temperance advocates that war can only be efficiently carried on if you've got sober people to do it. The moment you get alcohol into a war, it degrades it, just as if you get alcohol into peace, it degrades it.
It changed this way. You did a lot of sneaking. You served drink out of hours. You were breaking the law, and you were watching all the time, looking through your windows and such like. And you were careful who you served drink to after time, in case they shopped you.
Drink was a thing that men dreamed of. When we get out, we'll have a good old drink. When we go so-and-so, we'll have a nice drink. We'll have a party after the war and we'll have all the drink we want. Things like that. That was their dreams.
We lost an awful lot of good friends after the war. Ships that had gone and they were lost. They were sunk.
He picked me up outside Marble Arch Station. I was waiting for a friend. I was in the army, and he was in the army.
And this nice young man comes in the bar. And I fell in love with him.
I saw this, he was 6'1". Saw this sort of blue-eyed South African. He kept glancing down at me.
He was tall, dark and handsome. God's gift to women. And that was my husband, my first husband.
Anyway, we got married, and we had all we could have for our wedding breakfast was egg on chips and tea. There were no drinks, no nothing like that. There weren't any. We had that in the pub, but no drinks.
My husband, my first husband, he liked his drink. Being a sailor, I suppose it's natural. And of course there was no chance. My mother advised me. It would be a bad thing to do, to take a pub with him liking it so much. I would have given anything to have had a pub of my own. Anything. And that's why I didn't, because I couldn't trust my husband.
I look back now and think that half his charm must have been that he lived 8,000 miles away. And yet, you know, when she came to see me, he had to go home first. And he went ahead of me by about a month. And I had to go alone on the ship. I can still see my mother. She came to the ship to say goodbye. And I can still see her. She was little like me, standing there all alone, and she looked so forlorn that I felt really sorry for her. I wept over the rail for her.
So often it happened. A nice young woman would get hold of a nice young man. And once he was married, he just used to turn. I'm not going against men. Don't think that because I had a good husband, I had a good father. I had a good stepfather as well. But it was just something. He had to do that to make him look a man, to make him look as though he was somebody. It was a terrible attitude when you think about it afterwards. I mean, we didn't think about it because it was just life.
One Saturday, the All Blacks came to Bulawayo from New Zealand, and rugby is the game in Rhodesia. No, there wasn't any soccer, only rugby. And he said he was going to the rugger match and that he would be home a bit late, you know, for supper, which was normally between 6 and 7. And I got it all ready, and I waited until about 12:30 midnight. I thought I heard something out at the front, and I went and opened the front door, and he was crawling on his hands and knees up the front path, speechless. That was the first time. And he used to get aggressive. And he also got suicidal. And we had 2 rifles and 2 revolvers in the house. Heaven knows why.
The women used to maybe get bashed. And the husband went home at night and his dinner would be there, and of course waiting hours for his dinner. Wouldn't be fit to eat, and he'd just pick it up, throw it on the fire. And he would throw her out on the street, and he would throw the kids out as well. This happened loads and loads of times. It was all right in the summertime, but in the winter, poor souls.
And one more, I started having a go myself. And my tipple was Cape Brandy. Now, the Cape Brandy that we had was the pure grape because it was cheaper than trying to dilute it and adulterate it, because the grapes just go almost wild at the Cape. But what we got was not beautiful, matured in the cask. It was firewater, it was new. And I started, the South Africans call it dop. And I started drinking dop. And I found I could keep up with him. But one morning, my daughter, who was 2 years old, walked in at that door, came in and did something a little bit silly, and I slapped her for the first time. And I thought, right, this is it. This is history repeating itself. Domini is going to grow up with a drunken mother and a drunken father, and we can't do it. So that's why I came away.
But I have worked all my life, every single bit. When I met Bill 18 years ago, I was behind the bar, and I was 78 then. It was quite an exciting life, pub life. And to see it like that now, with no roof on it, and know what it used to be like.
It would be very dangerous to underrate the influence of the temperance movement at that time. And the criticism I would make of it after all these years is that had the temperance movement been more closely linked with the socialist principles, I think its effect would have been far more permanent.
You see, the people that did the drinking didn't write to me. It was the people that had to put up with it all that wrote to me. And all I could do was try to tell them that I'd had the same thing myself. Once I saw on a billboard outside a stationer's shop, "Read Mary Brown today, the wisest woman in England." And it terrified me. It really did.
My private opinion is that alcohol, used properly, is an asset to mankind. There must be thousands of teetotalers who don't believe in drink and don't like drink and don't have drink. But I always think the best thing in life is Shekhan Songu. Each to his own taste.
I was told one day, Harry, if you're going out on whiskey drinking, take on a few satanas and eat a satanas before you drink your whiskey, and you won't ever get drunk. How's that then?
Further than Preston.